Hi there, this is Suzanne Wagner, and we're going to discuss more in depth the number five. The number five in yogic numerology is the number of the physical body. It is actually associated with the pentagram, which was associated with women and witchcraft, or the Druidic systems or the Celtic systems in the old days. And so it's a very strong feminine number, and it represents the feminine power on this planet, which is the physical body. Birth, death, rebirth, the giving of life, the taking of life, health, herbs, nutrition, healing, all the things that are related to the physical body. So we call Mother Nature for a reason, because nature is feminine in pretty much every tradition in the world, no matter what country or culture you're from. So we associate all the birthing things with the feminine, which is a really fantastic, fabulous, powerful thing. But it's also sort of intimidating at times because it is about so many aspects of life and death and birth. And so the feminine in general is like fine with life. Like life is life, bad things happen. People get sick, people die. So in general, a lot of times in the old days, the midwives were women because they were good at handling the intensity of birth. Oftentimes women were with people when they were dying because women are good at the intensity of death. And everything on this planet is feminine, and everything on this planet is earth oriented. So my body is earth oriented. Nature, all the plants and flowers and fruits and vegetables and trees are feminine. And so there's this really powerful domain that is earth, that is feminine. And so it's always interesting to me when women say that they don't feel powerful. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you are the force. You are a microcosm of the macrocosm of Mother Earth. And inside of you is it all. It's the whole thing is right there inside of you. Now, you might not know how to tap into it, but that energy is right there, and that is a really, really powerful thing. So the number five says, get physical, be here now, show up, pay attention to what's happening in nature. Are you listening to the messages from the birds and the trees? Do you have your feet firmly planted on the ground? So in the shamanic tradition, they talk about the good red road, which is the shamanic way, which means to have your feet on the earth, on the red dirt of the earth, and walking at one with everything, with the earth. The reason I wanted to talk about this number at this particular time is that we're not walking with the earth. So the earth is screaming at us. The oceans are filled with plastic. The whales are dying. Birds are dying. They don't have enough food. The puffins are dying. The seals are starving because we're basically stripping the earth of its resources, and it can't replenish it enough. And so it's important for us to begin to listen to the earth and what it needs. Being a numerologist, bear with me. I like to look at numbers for dates of things. So if you add up World War II, the date that World War II started, which was so my brain is going to work. It was September 1st, 1939. If you add that whole thing up, it's a 5, which is the number 5 we're talking about. If you add up the numbers for the date that the Vietnamese War started, it was November 1st, 1955, and it's a 5. If you add up the Korean War, that date was June 25th, 1950. It's a 10. So it's a 5 and a 5, which is a 10, okay? So I find it interesting that, we have this repeating theme that conflicts start in a 5-year or a derivative of a 5-year. And that's interesting to me. So America was born on July 4th, 1776. That's a 5. What is it about the 5 that precipitates change? Well, the number 5 is called a secondary foundation change year, which means the ground underneath you is quicksand and something is going to have to change. And so changes often cause conflict. So something gets to a breaking point and it suddenly creates conflict. And there's this force that happens that mankind suddenly has to deal with, which sometimes ends up looking physical because the 5 is a physical number. So it's very physical, and the physical manifestation of that is war, and the manifestation of anger and hatred. Now, again, nature doesn't hate. Humans hate, but nature doesn't really hate the same way. Nature kills things in order to survive. It doesn't hate. You know, the leopard doesn't hate the baboon. The leopard loves the taste of baboon. Okay, so it's a different thing. But humans go to war and conflict over physical things: water, land, religion, belief systems. Okay, and so the masculine religions have had a tendency to fight the feminine religions more than anything. So Christianity is a masculine religion that basically took over the influences of the feminine matriarchal system. So before Buddhism, even, most of the systems were feminine-oriented, matriarchal. The women owned the land because they were the land. They inherited the land. They birthed on the land. So, the women basically owned everything, and so they therefore ruled until these masculine dynamic religions came in and usurped the feminine power. We're in this time where the feminine is coming back into power and coming back into balance, simply because now the feminine is going, the earth is screaming, can't you hear the earth screaming? And it's bothering the feminine, and children are being threatened. Children are dying, in almost concentration camps for the immigration. We've got all these crazy things happening that hurt the land, which is feminine, hurt children, which is feminine, hurt the women, which is related to the abortion issue and all of this kind of stuff. So what happens here is that the feminine is coming back into force and back into power. And so notice we've got a lot of women standing up for different things, and it includes everything, like standing up for water rights by the Native Americans, standing up for the children that are starving in Yemen. I mean, so there's this thing that the feminine is trying to come back in and say, this is not okay. Okay, that's the number 5 in its most positive, is that it's saying that this is not okay. And something needs to change in the physical, which is why it's the number 5. So I think it's important for us to kind of start to pay attention and to listen to what the earth is trying to say. And I don't think it's hard. I think people tune out the obvious because I think they're frightened. I think that if they start to recognize that they are part of the suffering of thousands and millions of creatures and birds and bees and everything like that, and that human choices are shattering the stability of ecosystems and life on the planet, that it is devastating. It feels devastating. Like, what do you do with that? How can you live with yourself knowing that? And I go, well, the first step is by making conscious choices in the physical. Like, okay, am I using a product for my garden that is not going to hurt the ecosystem? To me, it's a really simple answer. Compost. Lots and lots of compost. I mean, that's the natural thing to kind of use with this. And to look at all of our choices, like, are our choices aligned with the earth right now? Do they help the earth or do they harm the earth? And what would it be like if you literally took everything out of your house that was harming the earth? If everyone did that today, if you took away the chemicals that were harming the earth, the products in makeup that were being animal tested, if you did all of those things to help the earth and stopped buying things without researching whether they were helping or harming the earth, what a different world it would be, because what would happen is corporations would change. And that would be the feminine power coming in and shifting how everything is run physically. So the only thing that corporations and powerful people listen to is numbers. And, that 5 says the feminine has to start to come in and make the choices. Because you and I both know that it's mostly, not always, but mostly women that are looking at labels at the grocery store and, looking at seeing where something is from. Like, to me, what would it be like if we just bought clothing from the United States? That simple. That then you would have stores that would just be clothing from the United States. I fortunately live in a tiny little town that's what they do. So they only buy clothing from the United States, which I love, so then I don't have to worry about it. So it will shift the conscience of, stores and retail towards things that are really serving the greater good. And that makes you feel good. I mean, it makes me feel good that I'm supporting an American designer rather than, supporting sweatshops where they're abusing children in Vietnam. I mean, not that I don't want those people to have work, but I want them to have fair work. I want them to not be abusing children and doing different things. And so, there's this shift in the consciousness that's happening in the physical world right now, that we have to change how we interact and how we abuse and use the physical world, because the physical world is starting to say, you're going to collapse us. You're actually going to collapse us. We can't keep going at this rate. And the number 5 is that number that causes us to pay attention more to our physical world and our physical self. So start looking at when the number 5 shows up in your life. If the number 5 shows up in my life, I stop dead in my tracks and I'm like, oops, I saw a 5. What am I not noticing? What am I not paying attention to? Like what in the physical is trying to get my attention? And when I do that, I'll suddenly go, oh my God, over there's a rainbow, right? That I didn't see before because I was looking this way rather than this way. So the physical world is always talking to us in different ways, but are you listening? And trust me, if you start to listen, it's an amazing conversation that the physical world is having with us. And no, it's not all pleasant, but it's important. I feed a lot of birds at my house, and I have multiple feeders, so birds have funny preferences on feeders. So the hummingbirds will literally come and sit in my window right in front of my eyes and fly and say, hey, the hummingbird feeder is empty. And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry, the hummingbird feeder is empty. And I go out and they follow me over there and they're like, oh, good, she's like figured it out, right? And same thing with the birds. I mean, I literally have birds that will peck on my window and just go, hello, that feeder over there is empty. And it's funny to me. I mean, it's like, we are codependent on each other in the most positive way, more like interdependent. We are interdependent on things, and those things start to count on you. And what I would love right now with this number 5 is right now today, if every one of you could do something for the earth, even if that means you throw away, makeup that is tested on animals, if you throw away chemicals for your garden and just go buy compost, if you just do something that's for the earth, if you go buy bird seeds for the birds, what can you do that supports things? I mean, there was a beautiful article about England that because the English people, the Brits and the Scottish and the Welsh and all of this are so bird crazy and they love to bird watch, that they've literally changed entire ecosystems and promoted and brought forth all these birds. And more birds are in England than probably have ever been in England because people are feeding them and they are loving them and they're sending that energy to them. And again, if you love something, it grows. If you love this earth, you need to feed it. Okay, it needs to be fed at this point. Like it's been feeding us, we need to feed the earth. How can you give back? How can you feed the earth in some way? So I'm on my 32 acres and I do my best to give back to the earth. When I very first got there, I put up bird feeders, and for 2 years, the birds did not even know what to do with it. I mean, I threw away rotted seeds that were sprouting inside the thing because they'd never seen a bird feeder, like ever in their whole entire life. It took them 2 years to figure out, oh, is this for me? I'm so used to struggling every moment, like, oh, this is for me. And suddenly to take the grace that God has given us, which is the number 5, and to share our grace and our ability with something else is one of the greatest things that you can possibly do. You do make a difference for people. You hear stories about the beekeeper that spent his whole life taking care of bees, and he dies and all the bees come and land on his coffin and stay there for like 5 minutes and then fly away. Animals know. They know when they're being loved. They know when they're being cared for and taken care of. And that's important in this ecosystem right now that is really struggling. And you can do something right now that makes a difference. So use the number 5, ground in, be present, notice what is calling to you personally, and then feed that, nurture that, love that. That's the number 5. Thanks, everyone.